Uh, Once again, good morning to our participants from the US and good evening to the participants from India. So welcome you back to our first webinar sectoral session on green hydrogen and mobility, the new path for sustainable future. We have eminent panelists with us and the leadership from IACC. I'm just going to request Mr. Sundaram Srinivasan, our immediate past chairman of Indo-American Chamber of Commerce and managing director, South Asia of Lincoln Electric Company, India Private Limited, for his formal welcome remarks and take this session forward. Over to you, Mr. Sundaram.
Thank you, Sujata. So good morning again, once again, to all participants from the US and good evening to all the participants from India. So welcome to this session. Welcome all participants and a special welcome to our guest of honor, the Consul General from Chicago, and to all the speakers as well. So this session is on green hydrogen and mobility. Just for some background, there was a survey conducted last year on what people considered the most, I'd say, most imminent issue or most imminent concern for them. And of course, it was COVID. But the biggest long-term concern that everyone had, I think by a clear majority, was the environment. I think if you look today again as well, yes, we have another very, very large concern that has just come up in the last week of February. But even taking that into account, I think the environment would still remain top on everybody's long-term agenda. So it is in this context that this session is an extremely important one. Now, I recall when I was in school and even a few years back, hydrogen was always considered colorless. But now you have all different varieties of hydrogen. You have green, blue, yellow, pink, white. You have all kinds of hydrogen now. And all this is, of course, relating to the environment and how environment friendly it is. Of course, green hydrogen is the most environment friendly because it's from the electrolysis of water through environment friendly energy. So this is an important session, and this is a huge business opportunity, particularly with carbon credit trading, which could be there. So a very, very big opportunity, and therefore this session is of great importance. So once again, welcome to everyone. And it is now my privilege to introduce the guest of honor. Welcome to Mr. Amit Kumar, Consul General, the Consulate General of India, Chicago. Mr. Amit Kumar, IFS 1995 batch, has wide-ranging experience in several Indian missions abroad. He was the Deputy Chief of Mission in the Embassy of India, Washington, D.C., with ambassador rank, and also the Embassy of India in Tokyo. He served as Joint Secretary for Development Partnership Administration and as Joint Secretary for Human Resources Management in the Ministry of External Affairs, New Delhi. He has previously served as Under Secretary China and Director in the Foreign Secretary's Office in New Delhi. Ambassador Kumar holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. So with these opening remarks, over to you, Ambassador Kumar.
Thank you, Sundaramji, for that brief introduction and also for setting the tone for this session. I'm very happy to be here for this session on green hydrogen and mobility organized by the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce. As some of you might be aware, India has recently announced a policy push for hydrogen, including production-linked incentives. India has also been pursuing a rather ambitious target for electric vehicles. Before I proceed further, I would like to describe the challenge on the energy front that we are today facing. India is expected to witness the largest increase in the energy demand of any country by 2040. The central challenge before us is to ensure steady and reliable energy supplies while also ensuring that it is affordable, that its carbon footprint is low and it does not contribute to climate change, and that it also does not cause pollution and thus is not harmful to public health. The Indian government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, is responding to this complex situation through ambitious green initiatives, as well as driving deeper reforms in the energy sector. These range from energy mix strategies with greater push for renewable energy and liquefied natural gas, enhancing capabilities in exports of solar photovoltaic, hybrid and electric vehicles, energy use efficiency, and policy push for hydrogen. The results of these initiatives have been well acknowledged. Our Paris Treaty commitments were evaluated to be 2 degrees Celsius compatible. In fact, the Climate Transparency Report identified India as the only G20 nation to have met this mark. We are cooperating with the US bilaterally, regionally, and globally on climate change issues. One of the most important outcomes has been the launching of the Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 Partnership in April 2021, with 2 main tracks: the Strategic Clean Energy Partnership and the Climate Change and Finance Mobilization Dialogue. Through these measures, the 2 countries seek to mobilize finance and accelerate clean energy deployment, demonstrate and scale innovative clean technologies, and build capacities. As Sundaramji noted, none of the existing alternative energy sources can provide sufficient, consistent, and cost-effective energy supply like green hydrogen can. And it is a zero-emission fuel with a sole waste product of water. That is what makes this option so attractive. Of course, there are challenges pertaining to its storage, logistics of transporting and distributing it, and so on. As you might be aware, Prime Minister had announced the National Hydrogen Mission, which aims to make India a green hydrogen production and export hub. The mission was then announced in this year's Union Budget in February, followed by the first policy framework. We have an eminent speaker which will be focusing on our hydrogen policy. So it will suffice for me to say that it provides a number of incentives to producers of green hydrogen and ammonia and promotes renewable energy generation as the basic ingredient in making green hydrogen. Several companies have since then queued up to announce projects in the area of green hydrogen. India and USA have also launched a hydrogen task force looking at issues ranging from sustainable production of hydrogen to its safe deployment. Turning to electric vehicles and mobility, Government of India set a rather ambitious target of 30% of all vehicles on road to be electric by 2030. %100 foreign direct investment possible now with new manufacturing hubs and increased push to improving charging infrastructure. Federal subsidies and policies promoting Indian-made electric two-wheelers as well as a boost to localized IACC battery storage production are other growth drivers for the Indian electric vehicle industry. In September 2021, a production-linked incentive scheme for the automotive sector was approved by the cabinet to boost the manufacturing of electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. I know electric vehicle ecosystem in India as well as so what I'll also want to do is to reflect a little bit about what is happening in the US Midwest with respect to the electric vehicles. Now, as you know, US Midwest is a hub for traditional automobile industry in the US, and they were a little slow to warm up to the idea of electric vehicles. But if you take a look at the current situation, cumulative investments in this sector in recent years have topped $30 billion in the region. There is progress on all fronts: manufacturing of electric vehicles, battery storage technologies, and charging infrastructure. For example, in Illinois, there are two major electric vehicle companies. One is Rivian, which has a pre-order of over 100,000 electric vehicle trucks to be delivered to Amazon. The other major company is Lion Electric, a Canadian company which has set up a manufacturing capacity to eventually build 20,000 electric buses annually. In addition, companies like Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have all announced major new initiatives on electric vehicles. In fact, Ford recently announced that they will hive off the traditional automobiles and electric vehicles as two separate operational verticals, and in all likelihood, these will in due course become two separate legal entities as well. Companies are also investing in battery technology research and acquiring battery storage technologies companies to ensure vertical integration in the area. Now, the reason I'm sharing all this is the fact that USA is an important destination for our automotive components exports. And it is therefore important that the automotive component manufacturers associations and other stakeholders in India prepare themselves for the transition and respond effectively to the ongoing transition in the US market towards electric vehicles. If they do not adapt to the transition, they might be locked out of potential exports to the United States. On our part, of course, we have put ACMA and others in touch with electric vehicle manufacturers and relevant associations in the US Midwest. With those words, I would like to conclude my remarks, but as you can imagine, there is a lot of synergy, certainly in the electric vehicles segment between India and the United States, and the same would be true for the hydrogen sector as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Consul General. That was very illuminating and has set the tone for the rest of the session. Our next speaker will be Mr. Prabhu Bala. He is the Director of Precision Equipments. And he's done his MS from the US, and he's worked in corporate US before joining Precision Equipments in 2005. Since then, he has developed the company's North American export market and was instrumental in securing multi-million US export business. He also serves as a managing trustee of PPK Educational and Charitable Trust, which supports many social projects in rural Tamil Nadu. So over to you, Mr. Prabhu Bala.
Thank you, Mr. Amit Kumar, for setting the tone, and Sundaram for the kind introduction. And hello, fellow speakers. So good evening, India, and good morning, America. Myself, Prabhu, and serving as Vice Chairman at Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, Tamil Nadu State, and then Director at Precision Equipments. It takes great pleasure in joining the panel on green hydrogen and mobility, along with Mr. Amit Kumar, the CG of Chicago, Dr. Sumesh Arora from Mississippi Development Authority, and Mr. Amit Kumar from PricewaterhouseCoopers. And we have Mr. Srihari from KS Partners. United States supports India's emergence as a global leader, and which will ensure global peace, stability, growth, and prosperity. Remember, for stability and growth, energy is a vital factor. India's per capita energy consumption is about 1,000 kilowatt hour, and then of US is about 10,000 kilowatt hour, which is almost 10 times. And we all know that the US population is 1/3 of the India's population. India spends about $100 billion per year for oil imports. And of course, we have a reserve of 600 billion forex. So you can make the math, how many years we can have the forex reserve to spend on the oil. So from this, it is very clear that as against any other country, India needs to be energy independent and also have to be produced from sustainable source. India is currently producing close to about 40% of its energy from renewable, and has now laid its roadmap to be 85% in 25 years. The ambitious target of becoming carbon neutral by 2070 was declared by our Honorable Prime Minister of India, and the country is well on its path to make this a reality. And recently, the policy on green hydrogen was also been announced by Ministry of Power, which everyone is aware. Currently, India is largely depending upon fossil fuel. But in the coming days, we will have a judicious mix of energy ranging from use of natural gas, which is produced from LNG, wind, solar, hydro, biomass, and hydrogen. Production of hydrogen will be explored from fuel cell with carbon storage. And then we will also have hydrogen being produced by electrolysis of water, which forms green hydrogen, which is today's topic. The entire green hydrogen ecosystem can be divided into upstream, midstream, and downstream. The production of hydrogen by electrolysis forms the upstream. The purification and the storage can be termed as midstream. And then the downstream is where you transport and then utilize them for your power generation or fueling. It's a downstream. We all know that hydrogen is the element which has got the highest energy density per kg and the lowest on a volume, Newton meter cube volume. To give a rough example, hydrogen is almost like 14 times lighter than air. So it becomes difficult to store and transport. That's the main challenge. As on date, there are many hydrogen carriers like green ammonia and methanol, which are also being explored to answer this challenge of transportation. And the government of India's policy do address on the production of green ammonia and methanol as well. The green hydrogen is also being explored to be used in mixture with natural gas for large-scale process plants and also for steel mills. So instead of just using natural gas, you can have a combination of green hydrogen and natural gas. That's being explored right now. And actually, I'm at Dubai, and I was attending a conference on process equipments. And some of the speakers really presented that in large process industries, we talk about automotive being a large emitter, but not. We have big process industries, steel mills, which are large emitters of CO2. And there are technologies wherein you can use hydrogen for burning, and then you have zero emission. So that is being explored. Technology is available right now as we speak. So technology is evolving, and we have good number of companies who have successfully produced prototypes and even now have working models for electrolyzers and also fuel cells. Fuel cells being used for both stationary power generation and also for mobility, fuel cell powered electric vehicles. But we can envision that in India, the city-bound 2- and 3-wheelers will be mostly driven by battery power. The outbound cars will be driven by CNG, and then the long-haul trucks will be mostly driven by hydrogen or a combination between hydrogen and CNG. I urge India's small and medium business to look beyond their traditional business and explore the opportunity to work with US companies and to take part in this energy transition. Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, All India Chairman, Mr. Kapil, our state chairman, Mr. Arun, have made strong commitments to be a catalyst to help bridge this gap. Tamil Nadu, being one of the largest states in India for renewable energy, can be the leader in setting a trend for production of green hydrogen and making it a reality for mobility as well. I thank all the leaders, listeners in India and US. I thank my fellow speakers and the chamber for giving me this opportunity. And sure, if we can work together, we can transform the world and make it a better place to live. As we draw to the end of my speech, I'm glad to share that I had a wonderful experience driving a fuel cell car. And trust me, it is as good as a battery-powered car with fueled by hydrogen on board. And you feel happy about it because you don't emit carbon, but just water. Keep in touch and see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was very illuminating. That was good. And now our next speaker is Dr. Sumesh Arora, Director of Energy and Natural Resources Division, the Mississippi Development Authority. Dr. Arora has focused his 20 years experience in the energy sector and worked in the fertilizer industry. He has 2 patents for biogas production, and his research includes publications on energy and terrorism and biomass supply chains. Currently serves on the board of the National Association of State Energy Officials, NASEO. He has a PhD in international development and a master's and bachelor's in engineering. Over to you, Dr. Arora.
Thank you, Sundaramji. Thank you for the very kind introduction. And I'm truly honored to be here today. So good evening to everyone in India. It's getting later in the evening. So we're just getting day started here. And it was great to hear from Consul General Amit Kumar ji. So of course, like Tamil Nadu, Mississippi is also in the southern part of India. So we actually work closely with our Consulate General in Atlanta, and a great shout out to Dr. Swati Kulkarni there. So she's a great leader, and we truly enjoy working with her. Can everybody see the screen that I'm sharing now?
Yep, we can all
Okay,
see.
perfect. So yeah, so great. So again, my name is Sumesh Arora. I serve as the director for the State Energy Office in Mississippi. And some of the slides that you may find a little repetitive. So I was listening to Prabhu, your speak, and it's like just taken some of what you have done and really distilled that into my presentation here. So please bear with me, and I think it may be a little bit of a refresher for some of us. But I want to do a quick introduction about really what Mississippi is and what we have to offer here. So oftentimes we don't necessarily show up on the radar, but it's really I've been here a long time, 31 years, and adopted home state, if you will, originally from New Delhi. But so it truly is an honor to again connect with India in multiple ways. But Mississippi does have businesses from 26 countries located right here, including several of them from India as well too. And then we have 214 different companies actually that employ over 40,000 individuals from in Mississippi. And of course, the most recent announcement is from Nissan that's going to be making 2 new electric vehicles in Mississippi in the next coming years, investing over $500 million in the state's economy. Of course, we have 2 major manufacturers in Mississippi, both Toyota and Nissan, and the world's one of the most fuel-efficient cars. The Toyota Corolla is actually manufactured in Mississippi also. So we have a very strong automotive sector. And Amit Kumarji, I was really heartened by the comments this morning. So I just recently acquired a Ford Mustang EV. So really excited. It's a fun car to drive, and I think it's going to give Tesla a run for its money. So trying to live the grand experiment myself as well too, to really understand the challenges of actually not having the infrastructure fully developed yet. And how do we go charge that? So, but I think it's coming, right? So, as you notice, energy is also one of the key sectors where we have companies from overseas invested in the state of Mississippi as well. If you look at the exports from our state, also some of the top exports are also in the energy and the chemical sector as well too, and nearly $15 billion worth of exports take place from Mississippi. So you talk about mineral fuels. Chevron, which also has a very strong presence. In fact, Chevron's largest oil refinery in North America is located in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. So we really, a lot of the infrastructure and the industry that's already in Mississippi is really conducive to moving the next hydrogen economy forward. So with that said, my office itself, what I have what we call a 4-pillar strategy. We're one of 56 around the country. So every state and every territory of the US, such as Puerto Rico and Guam, also have an energy office, including Washington, D.C. So if you're listening to this webinar and you need to reach out to a local contact, we are the liaison to the US Department of Energy. So make sure that, if you're in a different state, that you can reach out to your respective state energy office there too. And more recently, the state energy offices, NASIO, which is our umbrella organization, is actually partnering up with an organization in India called AREAS, and similarly trying to get the state nodal agencies connected together also. So I think part of the opportunity here is to really be able to build those networks with different organizations. And of course, our mission is to really help increase the production in efficient and environmentally sustainable manner, but also maintaining safety, reliability, and affordability for all of our citizens. So, energy makes a very strong component of the state's economy. Over 15.5% of the state's GDP is tied to the energy sector, which generates over $1 billion in annual state and local tax revenues. The really interesting part about the energy sector also is the job creator, the job multiplier impact. So 2.5 jobs are created when we create 1 job in the energy space. And then also the earnings in this sector are also much higher compared to the average. And I think that statistic is probably true in a lot of other states too, where the energy sector really is actually a good sector for individuals to work in also. I'll switch over to the hydrogen part of it. And again, we've heard a lot of things about different shades of hydrogen. And, sometimes we think about the 50 shades of gray. Here we're talking about the 50 shades of hydrogen, which truly is a colorless gas. So I won't necessarily go through all of them, but the ones we hear most about really are the green, the gray, and the blue. Those are the three main colors that we really are talking about. Green being, fully renewable, capturing any emissions if there are. Blue being from the fossil fuel based with the carbon capture component, and then gray is kind of the traditional one. Sundar, you mentioned I work in the fertilizer industry. We made ammonia, and that's the feedstock is natural gas and pulling hydrogen from natural gas. So that back then we didn't really have those colors for hydrogen. And SMR here is not the small modular reactors, which we can have a whole conversation on small modular nuclear reactors also. But in this case, SMR is a steam methane reforming, and CCUS, of course, is carbon capture, utilization, and the storage component of what we're talking about here. So the US produces about 10 million metric tons of hydrogen per year. I think the global production is about 90 million metric tons. So about a little over 10% of the global hydrogen production is in the US. Most of that actually goes into petroleum refining and ammonia production. As I mentioned, I worked at one of those facilities, which is actually one of the largest ammonia plants in North America, right here in Mississippi. And then, but there are lots of potential hydrogen applications, and we're talking about energy storage, transmission opportunities, really enhancing the utility grid, decarbonizing the processes. Prabhu, I was telling you, my presentation is basically a slides of what you just talked about, so I won't have to be repetitive about that. But again, one of the advantages that hydrogen really has is the fact that we can leverage the existing fossil fuel infrastructure, some of the pipelines. Now, certainly there are challenges the way with hydrogen can be stored and produced, and you could get technical about talk about hydrogen embrittlement and how some of those pipelines may have to be protected against corrosion. My background in material science, so I learned a lot about hydrogen embrittlement back in those days, which still are, I think, some of the challenges that we still face today in terms of how do we really actually operationalize the both the manufacture, the transport, and the storage of hydrogen. So here's a graphic that's really a big eye chart, but this is something that the U.S. Department of Energy is now really starting to use. I've seen it numerous times in just the last few months now when the Department of Energy has been talking about hydrogen, and it really kind of ties everything together into kind of a single graphic, if you will. And we can have a whole session just on this particular graphic, and next time perhaps we'll get somebody from the U.S. Department of Energy to talk about that. But the idea being is, on one hand, you really have the production side of it, and on the other hand, you have the utilization side. The ammonia, actually, we heard that also, is not only can be used to make green ammonia from hydrogen, but ammonia is actually being used as a fuel as well too, especially in the marine sector. Recently, I've been asked to mentor a company in Breakthrough Energy Fellows. Breakthrough Energy is a program funded by the Bill Gates Foundation, and the company that I'm working with is actually based in New Zealand. And they're actually developing a green ammonia type technology as well too. So it's really interesting to see how many different pockets of work that's really going on out there, because we're still in some ways very early and still in the dawn of the era. I always remember my vice president of research when I was in the chemical plant that hydrogen is the fuel of the future, and he thought that it'll always be the fuel of the future. And I tend to think that maybe the future is now, because we were talking so much about it. And also it's indicative of what the investments are actually going into it. That future, I think, will be a little bit challenging to get to. We'll really have to have certain areas very specifically, strategically, that we'll have to work upon, which is to build those strategic partnerships, move the research and commercialization forward. And then, when it may seem like premature to think about it, but as we move forward in the hydrogen infrastructure, we have to start thinking actually about the cybersecurity issues of actually when we get more into the infrastructure as well too. Everything that we do is kind of, there's an undertone of cybersecurity in every issue. So not necessarily to sound alarming, but I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that this, because every one of those electric charger, every one of those fuel stations is now a gateway into our infrastructure, into the electronic infrastructure. So we have to be very deliberate about how do we make sure we protect that as well too. And then the biggest challenge I think that we'll have is the fact that we don't necessarily have the fully trained workforce and the skills that are really needed to move this sector forward. Mentioned earlier, we're actively forming. It's really heartening to see a lot of these partnerships being formed. Chevron, Toyota are pursuing a strategic alliance. You got an automotive company and an oil company really coming together on bringing their technology horsepower together. This was just announced last year. The other EV, we talked about some of the fuel cell vehicles. I was also like you, Prabhu. I was pleased to actually be able to driven a Toyota Mirai a year or so, 2 years ago, actually, when I was visiting the U.S. Department of Energy for a meeting there. So drives great, right? Very quiet. It was just like the electric power vehicles. But what makes hydrogen economically viable? There's still a lot of challenges there. But number one, it really is a policy issue. Like a lot of other industries, the policy will have to take place to be able to make sure that we can properly monetize some of this thing. In addition to policy, the research, development, and deployment, the demonstration of some of these projects will have to take place also. We're talking about the creation of hydrogen hubs and clusters that can achieve the economies of scale, and that's really what's needed for this thing. And I mentioned earlier, right, we can leverage some of these existing industrial complexes, the power generation systems. But the industry standards, I think, are still the very early stages of developing the standards in this space. So whether it's for production, storage, or moving this thing around. One of the biggest challenges we face in the US also is the siting and permitting processes. LNG terminals, LNG pipelines, right? Some of those things can take a long time to actually get permitted. And sometimes, we think like we don't have the times, especially given the current geopolitical climate. And public acceptance. We're still not to the point where even electric vehicles are fully publicly accepted, and for some very good reasons. So that's going to take some time as well too. The U.S. Department of Energy is now really doing its part, and this is very recently announced in February. They're still taking information. Actually, it's got a request for information. It's still open right now. So $8 billion is now being allocated for the regional clean hydrogen hubs. The $1 billion for a clean hydrogen electrolysis program, and another $500 million for clean hydrogen manufacturing and recycling initiatives. These requests for information are actually open for another few days, and hopefully, so the funds have already been appropriated and authorized in the infrastructure bill that passed in October of last year. It was a bipartisan bill. So it's really heartening to see that this kind of funding is now being allocated towards the technology. But again, we're just getting started. When you really think about the big picture. There's another program from the U.S. Department of Energy called Hydrogen Shot, which is really more focused on the R&D and trying to bring the cost of clean hydrogen down to $1 per kilogram in 1 decade. And that's what they call the 111 program. And there's, I've put links to all of these websites in my presentation. So later on, when you want to go take a look at that. But the economic impact from something like that, if we can truly achieve the $1 per kilogram in 1 decade, is over $140 billion in revenues. And the job creation is what's a tremendous number on that. So over 700,000 jobs. We're also seeing partnerships. It's really important to talk about that. Just recently, 4 states, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, they announced one. I've talked to folks in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. They're looking at partnership. Kentucky, West Virginia, they're looking at partnerships. So I think it's going to be really important that people from different walks of life really come together to really be able to solve some of the daunting challenges that we have in front of us to move this technology forward. I developed this butterfly model, what I call, when I was doing my doctoral research, and really talking about how academia, state and federal government, the private sector, nonprofit organizations really have to kind of come together. It's a visual representation of how different areas will have to really be collaborating with each other. The key thing in this thing I also talk about is the fact that financials are really important, right? So have to make sure that the audits for the financial, the project evaluation are somewhat removed from the folks who are actually doing the work, because you really need that oversight to make sure that we do this in a very ethical manner as we move forward. And then, of course, Mississippi does have a key advantage when it comes to hydrogen. We really like to work with our companies, and we're really excited about the fact that we had a project announced called High Store Energy, which again relies on the existing infrastructure. And it's unique in the sense that it'll be able to take advantage of the underground salt formations that we have to be able to store safely and effectively many years worth of hydrogen within the infrastructure here. And it's a renewable hydrogen hub that we hope will come to fruition and then be able to store the hydrogen in those salt caverns thereby making it possible to actually attract other industry to the area also that actually will rely on that hydrogen for their production processes, for example. And then finally, here's the last, my contact information. Certainly will be around for the rest of the session to answer any questions. Prabhuji, back to you. Sundaramji, back to you as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Arora. You went into quite some depth into the technology of hydrogen and all its various different shades, and you didn't quite get to the 50 shades of gray, but you got through quite a few shades. Yes, okay. So thank you for that. And I think, well, I've overstayed my stint here at this session, so I will now be handing over the session to Mr. A. Shekhar, who is the CEO of Spike Power Protection Systems and Technologies. Mr. Shekhar is the CEO of Spike Protection Systems and Technologies with over 35 years of experience in the electronics industry. So he will now be taking over this session. And so over to you, Mr. Shekhar.
Thank you, Sundaram. Yeah, this tone has been set pretty well. We had quite a good understanding from the Consul General, who explained about the India's targets, what we are trying to work for the climate change and how good this would happen. I have the next speaker, Mr. Amit Kumar. He's the partner leader, Power and Utilities and Mining for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Amit has more than 25 years experience working closely with various Indian government organizations, such as Ministry of Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, Ministry of Power, IREDA, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, several multilateral and bilateral organizations such as World Bank, GGI, UNDP, UNIDO, ADB, DFID, GIS, and KFW, along with several private sector companies. Further, Amit has led a team which prepared Smart Mobility for Smart Cities, a discussion paper, and presented the strategies at the expert group meeting in Vienna. Presently, Amit is supporting Department of Heavy Industries, Government of India in facilitating the rollout of FAME scheme phase 2, which we all of us know, like how it makes it easier for us to access our electric vehicles. Over to you, Amit. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Shekhar. And thanks, organizers, for inviting me and giving this opportunity. Good morning, friends in USA, and good evening in India. I have few slides to present. Just bear with me. Is the screen visible? Can you please confirm?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you. So I am, from the hydrogen perspective, I am changing the gears to electric mobility scenario, because a lot of things are happening here in India, both in the government sector, bilateral, multilateral agencies, and now it has excited a lot the private sector as well. And I will also present as to what is happening in the pandemic, because pandemic people were feeling that maybe this is not the right time when the electric mobility can have a leg up, but that is not the case. So starting from policy, the numbers, and the areas of collaboration as we see between India and US in this particular area, that's what I'm going to present. So electric mobility, the thought process within the policymakers in India started long back. Although it has seen light of the day in terms of a policy in the year 2015, when the FAME 1 and then subsequently the FAME 2 came about in 2019. But there was a mission which was set up way back in 2011 and 2013. That mission developed a plan for 2020. And subsequently, then the government thought that to break this chicken and egg situation as to, who will provide that incentive in the charging infrastructure for the incentive to make the electric vehicle viable as compared to ICE engine, they came about with this scheme of FAME, and which was better in FAME 2 by 2019, where the numbers, the incentives leapfrog. Now, FAME 2 scheme, that is what is quite popular, not only in India, but overseas as well, because everybody wants to know that what has been the impact, what is the layout, and so on and so forth. So in terms of numbers, $1.33 billion, that is what is the budgetary allocation from the government. It's a taxpayers' money, which is going to provide the incentive for manufacturing here and creating charging infrastructure. It was initially started in 2019. It was initially for 3 years, but then it extended because of the pandemic, and government said that we can also expand the area and the horizon and can also put in extra money if needed. So now it is valid till 31st March 2024. Incentives are available across the board for different types of vehicles. Like in case of two-wheelers, it is for $200 per kilowatt hour. This is based on the battery kind of which is used, and it was just doubled or 1.5 times from US 133 earlier. Capping, incidentally, is increased to 40%. This is quite a good incentive. That overall capital cost, which is for per vehicle, earlier it was capped as 20%, but now it has been increased to 40%. So that means more incentives can be availed by a consumer. Energy Efficiency Service Limited, ESL as it is known in India. So they have been given the mandate. Now the government has moved, and this is quite significant. The government is saying it is the taxpayers' money. Why don't we utilize it for the public transport? So you will find a lot of money going for e-buses, which are used for public, transport, and also commercial vehicles and trucks. So that is where the shift is happening. Subsequently, I'll stick my neck out and say that from 2024, it is quite likely that two-wheeler subsidies or incentive might go away. Because there is a parity. There is likely to be a parity by 2024 between the electric vehicle or two-wheeler and the ICE engine. So I think more and more money will be offered for the larger vehicle, trucks, e-buses, and so on and so forth. It may also be phased out in some time for four-wheelers, because two-wheelers and four-wheelers, as you can imagine, is being consumed by the private consumers, right? And as I'm saying again and again, it's taxpayers' money. So that's where the focus has been, and we are working towards that. And so I'm giving some hint about it. ESL has also been appointed for three-wheeler segment. So they are working on aggregating a demand of 300,000 electric three-wheelers. They already floated a tender for 100,000 that is already evaluated, and the companies have been awarded. So what ESL is doing, they are aggregating the demand from different states, cities who are asking for the three-wheeler, and then based on this, they are floating one single tender, high-value tender. This has been a successful example for this company. You might be knowing that this company floated a single tender for 5 million smart meters. One single tender of 5 million smart meters. So they have that experience and expertise to float. So this is where the work is happening. And the government and the private sectors are working together. Just a bit on the PLI scheme, Council General Mr. Kumar also mentioned about it. It's a $3.47 billion PLI scheme for auto sector. And within auto also, the focus was more on electric vehicle. It was not just electric vehicle, they said technology agnostic, EV or hydrogen fuel cell, whatever makes sense. Let's come about with that kind of manufacturing, and we'll give you the incentive. Out of 115 applicants, so you can imagine the kind of response which we got from across the world. Almost all companies submitted their bids for this incentive because they feel that India is a huge market. Why don't we manufacture here? And that's why this scheme was right at the right time. So out of 150, these are the 20 companies. I'm not going to read them out. These are the 20 successful companies which have been shortlisted, and they are called as champion OEMs. If you want to know what is the incentive offered, they are bidding for 13 to 16% incentive, auto OEMs, and for the other segment, the ancillary market, the ancillary segment is going to get 8 to 11%. That is the incentive in terms of production cost. The other scheme, which is concurrently running, and by the way, I will not be able to divulge much on this because we are the official consultant for Government of India and NITI Aayog on this. And this is to create 50 gigawatt hour of advanced cell chemistry in India. And now the work is also starting on the R&D part of it, and which is for 5 gigawatt hour of niche ACC as it is called. So 50 already bidded out, where the one single facility is 5 gigawatt hour, the maximum 20 gigawatt hour, one single location. So you might find that only 3 successful bidders walking away with this price, 20, 20 and 10. 2 bids of 20 gigawatt hour and 1 bid for 10. The requirement was that 60% domestic value addition over a period of first 5 years from the date of manufacturing, that has to be there to avail the full incentive what you are asking for. And then I think the incentive, total incentive was something like 18,500 crores. Given the response, because 10 companies have submitted their bids, very strict QR, qualifying requirements were there. Almost all the biggies globally, they have collaborated with the Indian companies here and submitted their bids. It is quite likely based on this response that this scheme might be extended for another 50. And there is a chance, depending on, once the evaluation is done, I can't divulge as I said earlier, but, given the kind of response, the technology, the latest technology, state of the art, and the R&D which is going to be proposed subsequently, based on those outcomes, the government is feeling confident that maybe we can further extend this. So this is what is happening to create an ecosystem for the electric vehicle and the fuel cell to operate in India. Now, it's not only the central government which is working on it, the states picked up after that. Various states announced, and these are very, very specific targets or incentive schemes or the numbers which they wanted. The yellow in the India map, you will find that all these dark yellow states have announced their final EV policy, electric vehicle policy. The pale yellow are those which are in draft stage, are in the final, almost in the final stage, and the gray ones are still to work upon. So you will find that almost a majority of the states in India have already worked on their electric vehicle policy, whether it is related to incentive, like Delhi has announced $66 per kilowatt hour for two-wheeler. This is over and above what the central government has done. Or EV charging infrastructure installation. They are giving incentive, they are giving land, they are encouraging utilities to come about, they are asking the private sector to come and work in the PPP mode or in the public transport electrification. So these are some of the highlights from one state to other, they vary. So they are not copying each other. They are coming out as to what is required in their particular state and building on what the central government has announced earlier. Now, I was mentioning about what has happened during the pandemic, and people actually want to know about it. So here is a comparison as to what has happened from FY22 January FY22. This is the latest data till January. That how much is the growth for ICE engine versus the electric vehicle. So for two-wheeler, just for example, it has been minus 13% from 20 to 21 and another minus 25% till January for FY22. Whereas for the same segment, two electric two-wheelers, you will find a growth of 65% and, hold your breath, 232%. That's the kind of growth in the electric two-wheeler segment in India, even during the pandemic. Similarly, for three-wheelers also, you will find that, while this is the zigzag, because of the pandemic, the demand was on the lower side and then it picked up, but huge demand for even electric three-wheelers as well. And with the demand aggregation, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to pick up speed very soon. Similarly, on the four-wheeler side, the growth has been something like 50% in the first 10 months over the last year, from in FY22. So I think the clear winner is two-wheeler segment, where I think in the next 2 years, as I said earlier, the parity will be there with ICE engines and probably you don't need any incentive. One segment which I have not highlighted but is very important is the e-rickshaw. Instead of manual rickshaw, we have this e-rickshaw concept, and in all large metro cities, you will hardly find any manual rickshaw. So this has been a revolution, and it pays back within a year. That's what the model has been. It is mostly assembled, but now there are companies who are Japanese, Indian, and some European companies who are working on this, and they are manufacturing the entire setup here. This has grown something like 33% in the last 5 years, e-rickshaws. Okay, this is for the charging infrastructure quickly, because there are incentives, and this was to break the chicken and egg situation. Government said that, okay, let us take it in our head. We will provide you incentive. And now the private companies are coming up. EESL, Power Grid Corporation, Rajasthan Electronics Instrument, these are all government-owned companies and NTPC. They were given the task, set up the critical mass, set up these at least 1,500 kind of charging infrastructure, charging stations in India. And now, Ether, Blue Smart, ChargeZone. So these are Fortum. Fortum is a Swedish company. So these companies are coming forward with the latest state-of-the-art technologies and having a charger which can cater to all kinds of technology, two-wheeler, three-wheelers, fast charger, slow charger, AC, DC, everything. So that's where, now the private sector has taken up, because they feel that the critical mass of electric vehicles running on the road, at least in the big cities. And that's what the target is: 22,000 electric vehicle charging stations by oil marketing companies. The two segments which see the market and are taking this step: private sector, as I said, those who are providing the ride-hailing or manufacturing these the electric vehicles, and second is the oil companies, because they have this already made out setup, oil vending stations where they are providing, instead of fuel, petrol and diesel. You come here and charge your four-wheeler or two-wheeler. 9 megacities with over 4 million population have been identified, which are going to be fully electric vehicle ready in the next 2 to 3 years. That is what is the next target. Areas of collaboration, this is the last. And based on the US experience, we feel that this is a program which is running successfully between India and UK. This is something which can be attempted in this space as well. Twinning cities. Twinning means one city from India, similar city in US. Maybe we can share experience. We can have the best practices from there. The technological collaboration, B2B kind of a collaboration. And that is what we have identified: 3 cities here in India, 3 cities in UK, and they are working wonderfully. So Bangalore, Hyderabad, and one city in Gujarat, we have identified these 3. There are many other cities, which can be taken up for this. Public awareness and outreach, we have a lot to learn what has happened and what is happening in US. Hawaii and Washington focus on utility level outreach. And Colorado, for example, a statewide coalition of business and state organizations to spread education. This is something which we are also trying to do here, and we need to learn as to how this can be done. So some kind of a case study, presentation, and exchange in this regard probably will be helpful. Very important. US is working on interoperability, standardization. This was announced in the budget, but this is something where a lot of work needs to be done globally, and more so in countries like India, China, and others. Where a lot of different electric vehicles come on the road, and they have a different charging requirements, battery requirements. So how they can operability is possible for this kind of thing. New York has unified charger standards and interoperability. So that is something which is a successful case study and can be replicated here in this region. Consumer benefits, shift to electric powertrain can be accelerated. Fiscal, non-fiscal incentives, both can be provided. More than 10 states have allowed EV to use high occupancy vehicle lanes. So these are the kind of benefits which can be provided to consumer as an incentive for them to go for this kind of, including California, Colorado, Florida. Everybody is doing this. And in EV drivers, incidentally, we also found out that in New Jersey, they enjoy 10% discount on off-peak turnpike and toll road rates. So this is all these things actually encourage consumers whenever they are in the doldrum whether to go for EV or continue with the ICE engine. Technological advancements, V2X, V2G, these all things are where the utilities will also be interested in joining hands. So we can collaborate in this, and this is something which is state-of-the-art technology, cutting-edge technology, where some of the European countries and US are doing marvelous work. That's where I find that private and the public utilities here in India and the US can work together. And finally, financing. This is something which will bring the overall cost down, and this is where probably we need to also collaborate as to how the overall cost, the capex, and also the cost of ownership, total cost of ownership can be brought down. So there are a lot of areas, as I mentioned here, where India and US can work together to make it more widely acceptable and profitable to everyone. I stop here and happy to take any question now.
Thank you, Amit Kumar. The question and answer session would follow after the final speaker, Mr. S.K. Srihari. I have great pleasure to introduce Mr. Srihari, partner of K&S Partners. He's an electronics and communication graduate and also a lawyer. Besides being a registered patent agent, handles patent drafting and prosecution in the areas of electronics and telecom, computer science, electrical, medical devices, electromechanical and instrumentation engineering. He renders opinion on issues of patentability, freedom to operate, invalidity, infringement, due diligence, and technology trends for clients. He also specializes in filing and prosecuting design applications. A member in the Bar Council of Delhi, and he knows, is multilingual with English, Hindi, Tamil, and Kannada. Over to you, Mr. Srihari.
So much, Shekhar. And other co-panelists. In fact, some of the statistics shown by Amit Kumar was really interesting. Yeah. So that sets the tone, and you can call me, I'm an outlier in this panel, or odd man out, coming from the legal background, and and I'll be throwing some lights on a patenting aspect vis-a-vis green hydrogen and e-mobility sector. So just to give you a broad landscape as to how India is doing in terms of patent application, patent filing, in terms of the patent ecosystem. I just want to take you through the entire kind of ecosystem as of now, and then I'll show you some statistics. I think there was a lot of noise around the way the Indian Patent Office functions in terms of lot of backlog in clearing applications, and also in terms of the quality of examination. And third, with respect to software patenting. The reason software patenting becomes quite important, because whenever we talk about e-mobility, there's a lot of software angle to it. It's not just on the high-tech side, but even on the automobile side, there's a lot of software which goes in to make it more efficient. So that's the reason I brought out from the angle of software patenting. If you look back around 6-7 years back, say around 2014, things started to drastically change when India set the tone for Make in India. And we invited all the major companies to set up their plant in India and start manufacturing, and then started linking it to production link incentives. Then there has been a lot happening around Startup India initiatives and so on. So after that, there was a spotlight on patenting system and a need for overhauling the system. In that aspect, I think the government as well as the Indian Patent Office has had the intent to kind of completely change the approach and the outlook. And if you see now, the Indian Patent Office has progressed significantly from where it used to be and where it is now. Imagine there was a situation where there was only about 100 and 120 examiner and controllers put together to handle a huge volume of patent applications, which has now kind of increased to around tenfold. And now we are looking at around 800 to 900 controllers and examiners put together. And also the processes have changed. And also in terms of software patenting, there has been a welcoming change where the Indian Patent Office is able to appreciate applications coming from inventions coming out from software. So that's a major change, what the Indian Patent Office has gone through. And when it comes to backlog, a significant progress where earlier the waiting time used to be about 6 to 8 years time, which has now reduced to around 2 years time. And in fact, when it comes to startup, it's even around 1 year, where there have been many startups who have got applications granted within 1 year's time period. So there you can see a major change as to how the Indian Patent Office is functioning now. When it comes to software, we feel the grant ratio has substantially increased, and it's almost touching around 88 to 90%. In fact, it can even slightly beyond even 90%. So that's on the software side. And when it comes to a kind of number of filings and disposal, in terms of filing, there has been a great leap where we see roughly around 50,000 applications we receive 50,000 applications in India, and out of which 80% of the applications are filed by the foreign companies, and remaining around 15 to 20% of the applications are being filed by the domestic players. That's a bit of stats in terms of filing. And the number of disposal cases has gone up, where the grant ratio has gone up, and that's providing a kind of a good tool for anybody who wants to manufacture in India and also kind of service. So overall, it's a very positive trend from the Indian Patent Office, where They want to project themselves as a go-to to make things quite easy and pro customer. That's what I would say. Or pro companies who are into R&D and help them innovate more. With this, I'll also share a presentation in terms of what are the trends in terms of patenting aspect on green hydrogen, and also on other aspects in terms of e-mobility. Okay, so is my screen visible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks.
We are just shooting our time, so just.
Oh yeah, so okay, just a minute. Yeah, so this is the overall trend in terms of patent, where in terms of general technologies around hydrogen power is in general, this is not specifically related to green hydrogen, but overall as a hydrogen, what are the technologies around and what are the patents that has been filed over the years. So if you see the trend clearly, the number of patent applications have gone up starting of the decade, starting from 2001 until 2018 and 19. Roughly around 16,000 patent families are around hydrogen power technologies, which is in general. And when we talk about specific green hydrogen, clearly the number has increased. If you see the start of the decade, it was roughly around in single digit, and which has now gone up to 300 plus applications per year. And overall put together around 1,200 applications in terms of green hydrogen technology. And that's how the landscape looks like in terms of patenting. And if you see a country-wise coverage on green hydrogen, China stands out with around 500 plus applications, followed by US with around 150 plus. And we have Europe, and we have other countries, roughly around 40, 20 to 40 applications, so 20 to 60 applications in fact. And if you see the majority of kind of technologies which are upcoming and a lot of research is happening, is on the following, with highest number goes to electrolysis, electrochemical and electrolytic cell technology, followed by other areas. And clearly we can see that entire focus now is shifting towards green technology and e-mobility side in terms of battery and other stuff. And this is how the block looks like. So this starting from electrolysis block till the charging, it looks pretty much the entire focus is there, and everybody is now focusing on these areas. Coming to kind of Indian stats, over the years, I think the numbers have picked up, and we are receiving roughly around 1,000 applications per year on e-mobility side, which can include all the technologies. It could include even battery, fuel cell, and on automatic driving. So it could involve all those autonomous driving. And these are the major players who file applications in India, which include Honda, Suzuki, General Motors, LG, Toyota, Nissan, Qualcomm, TVS. So this is how the spread look like in terms of number of applications versus the big filers. And with this, I conclude my session. And thanks to IACC and other panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Srihari. This patenting was also very important. We have just run out of time, so the questions would be on offline later that would be answered. I would like to thank all the speakers and the panelists who had done this program on green hydrogen and mobility. It started well with the Consul General explaining India's position on how serious we are with climate change and what actions we are really taking with respect to the climate change, and on which includes about our seriousness to get into green hydrogen and electric mobility, which can provide us that real sustainable future. And it's one of the countries which has sort of walked the talk, which is what was explained by him. Followed by it was Prabhu Bala, who explained us like what are the challenges which you have in the production of the hydrogen facility, its transportation, and finally the distribution and the utilization, how it has to be happening. He gave us some of the statistics about how to take this forward. Dr. Sumesh Arora from the Mississippi Development Authority had a very nice and detailed presentation on the sectors of like what are the different shades of these hydrogen and what do they mean by them. Of course, I come from I also have a refinery background, so I could understand all hydrogen was only on when I looked at my hydrogen plant for my hydrocracker, when I have to do for my gasoline, reforming and so on. So that's what was the idea. But now I know how far it has grown and the way the production would have to take place and go further. And Mr. Amit Kumar of PwC, which stepped into what is electric mobility, which is what we really see, and how far our Indian government has taken it up, and what are all the opportunities which we are now opening up, where to US as a trade to work between India and US, because US has been on the forefront on this electric mobility and also on the green hydrogen production. So we know that, and he explained us like how we should be partnering together in a way which would be beneficial on increasing the trade between these two countries. I fully accept to it, and it's he also explained about the FAME 1 and FAME 2 and how we would all achieve parity, and that's right, which we have seen in the renewable energy sector. We have seen how we were able to achieve parity, and it's a question of time. The mobility would also go to the same. Finally, Srihari explained how important it is that we need to have the patents and things in order, because there's a huge amount of investments which are going into it, why India and US need to look at this area more seriously to ensure that we get these things in order so that all our investments are well protected, and which is pretty important for us. I would say rather, I'm pretty happy that, we have it show the panelists really explain to everyone that what is the future which is available for, and what huge opportunities which are opening up between India and US in getting to this, and how serious India is in this business. And US has a great potential to work with us, and we have a great potential to, do the same with the US. So I think this is a fantastic session. I'd like to thank you all once again, for a very nice presentation, which you all put it up. And it has been quite a learning experience. And I personally, I have windmills which supply green power, and I also drive an electric vehicle, so I know how different it is. Thank you, guys. Thanks all. Thank you all.